My earliest childhood memories are of Ethiopia, Africa. I have a few little memories before I went to Ethiopia. I remember when my parents were building their home, and I remember a glass jar breaking and getting hurt with the glass jar. But just those were really sketchy memories. But my childhood really started, as far as remembering it, in Ethiopia, Africa. My dad was a professor at BYU in education, and he and some colleagues from BYU, Idaho, and from Utah State put in for a USAID grant. And when they received the grant, then they had the funding to be able to move to Ethiopia and set up a teacher training college there to try to improve the quality of education. So they were there doing that, but I was there just growing up, and I started school there. I didn't start in kindergarten because they didn't have one. So when I should have gone to kindergarten, I went to first grade. I remember going to second grade there, and I just have great memories of growing up with my brothers and my parents. We met in a branch that was of all expats. And I remember my mom and dad wishing that they could share the gospel with some of the people that they were interacting with at the university and some of the people that they were helping. A doctor who was there trying to help unwed mothers, and a man that was there who had an orphanage, and he would and a little school. And he would literally feed the children with the scraps from the garbage of the embassies. And our little branch would take on these projects as for fast offerings. We would unite our fast offerings and try to help some of these people. So those are vivid memories for me. I remember meeting in people's homes. We would have a little primary class or a little Sunday school class in someone's bedroom, and then we would have a sacrament meeting in someone's living room, and it kind of shifted from home to home. But those are my earliest memories of church. We were under what was called the International Mission at the time, so I guess we got our sacrament cups and whatever supplies were needed through the International Mission, which I believe was in Switzerland. But there was a small group of Latter-day Saints, and my parents wanted so badly to share the gospel, but they were under strict instructions not to, because this was in the 60s. And so after this group left, then there would be no priesthood. There would be no way to sustain the church if new converts came into the church. And so later, when the church actually did enter Ethiopia, and the mission, they sent missionaries in, and they actually started branches in Ethiopia. I remember my mom following that in the church news and just being so excited that that day had finally come. I remember when she read an article about the first Ethiopians who were able to go over to Ghana to the temple and receive their endowments. And I remember her just crying, because this was a dream come true for her after having lived there at a time when the gospel wasn't in that country and where church was just our little group, and that was it. I remember starting school there. My first grade teacher's name was Miss Cool, and it was a kind of an English school. Then I went to an American community school that had been built, and I think we were the first ones to go to that school, and that was my second grade year. Because the school was new, there was, on the playground, there wasn't any grass yet. And so we'd go out and play on the playground equipment. And I remember one day getting down into the dirt, and all of a sudden I looked down and I was covered with ants. Ants are a big problem in Africa, and they're very big. And so I looked down and I was just swarmed with ants. Not just one or two crawling on me, but just tons of ants. So I started screaming, but I was right in the middle of the monkey bars. So I remember my teacher, her name was Mrs. Shuey, and I remember she came running out there to those monkey bars, and she pulled me through the bars and then ran me into the classroom. And in the back of our classroom, there's a little girl's bathroom and a little boy's bathroom, and she took me into the bathroom, she stood me up on the toilet, and she started batting at the ants and trying to get them off of me and taking off my clothes because the ants had gone under my clothes. And finally, she was just trying to get all these ants gone, and she got down to my underwear. Well, here I am, this little Mormon kid, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness. I said, no, Mrs. Shuey, no. And she said, Mr. Wilcox. She always called me Mr. Wilcox. Mr. Wilcox, I have 5 sons. Whoosh. And so there lets you know that Mrs. Shuey and I were good friends. But the great memories, I remember playing with little cars out on the wall between our home and the outside. We lived in kind of a walled community so that it would be safer. We had a watchman at night. We had a maid who would come and help us during the day. Her name was Lucia. And I remember little words. I remember tanastaling and tinish, little tanastaling. I think that's hello or goodbye. I remember the food. I remember wat and injera. It's kind of a spongy bread and kind of a meat stew. And I remember eating that. And I remember our maid would pull all the furniture out from around the room into the center of the room so she could clean. And I remember my brothers and I just getting on that little island of furniture and crawling around like it was a ship or an island or a hideout. And so just great memories. I remember the good times with my brother. I remember the good times at school. I remember sneaking in. My little brother and I would sneak into my older brother's room, and he would buy bubble gum. And he wouldn't just buy 1 or 2, he'd buy like a whole box of bubble gum. And so we'd go in and we'd sneak some, and then we'd go in and sneak some more. And pretty soon we'd emptied the whole box and somehow didn't think that he'd ever figure out it was us. But good memories. But I also have very vivid memories that I think have impacted my life. I remember the shoeshine boys. Everywhere you went, all the boys from the country would come into the city and they would to earn money, and there was nothing for them to do. And so they would shine shoes. And so I remember everywhere we would go, there would be shoeshine boys coming up and asking us to give them a few coins. I remember the beggars that would be there, and that anywhere we'd go, they'd surround our car asking for little coins from my dad. I remember seeing kids who didn't have enough to eat, and I remember that, that bothered me. I saw firsthand the effects of illiteracy. I saw a country where education was impossible. And so these children, these young people simply had no futures. And so when I got back to the United States, I think those memories affected me very deeply and actually shaped the direction I would go in my life, because I did decide to become a teacher. And I felt very strongly that by dedicating my life to education, I was going to be able to help people avoid some of the bleakness that I saw in Africa. I remember going to school lunch and seeing kids throw away whole trays full of food, and that so they could run out and play. And I just remember feeling so shocked by that here these kids in America had food to throw away, and I had seen and been with children in Africa who were eating out of garbage cans. And I remember how hard it was for me to see children who didn't have what they needed. And And I think that's how come it's hard for me to see Americans treat their pets and pamper their pets. And it just bothers me to see dogs who are getting taken care of better than the children that I saw in Africa. And so I think some of those things have definitely shaped who I am today. So Africa is full of good memories for me, going to the swimming pool, and they had a little swimming pool called Soda Ray. And I remember going there and the monkeys that were in the trees and how the monkeys would come down out of the trees. And my brothers and I would hold food out for them so that they would come and take it out of our hands. But I also remember very dramatic moments, very life-shaping and life-changing moments when I saw people who suffered. And I think that forced me at a very young age to grapple with things that other children are maybe a little more protected from. And as I grappled with that, I think it really did give me a different perspective, an attitude of gratitude, and a desire, a burning desire from a young age to make a difference. And I hope that that's something I've been able to do. When I got back from Africa, I was in 3rd grade. I probably should have been in 2nd grade, but I ended up in 3rd grade. And I went to a school that was near our home called Grandview School. And I have great memories of being there, but memories that are a little different than I think the memories of most kids in elementary school. I didn't know much about sports. In Africa, I hadn't participated with sports. I hadn't participated with, playing soccer or football or baseball. And so even when I got back, and there I was in 3rd grade, but I already was behind. All the other boys knew the rules. All the other boys knew how to play the games. And so I didn't get too involved in that world because I didn't want them to lose on my account, and I didn't want to lose. And so I just kind of shied away from that. And when you don't do something well, then you never get any better at it. But I found other things that started to perk my interest and started to give me a circle of friends. And I'm grateful for the opportunities that school provided. I feel bad now because schools are sometimes so focused on the academics and the test scores that they're not providing for kids some of the rich memories that I have of my elementary school. Of course we learned to read, of course we learned math, of course we learned history, and of course we learned those things. But we also were very engaged in the arts and very engaged in activities that are now some of my sweetest memories of childhood. I remember being a part of a little singing group that they started at the school called Grandview Freedom Singers, and we would learn patriotic songs and dress up in little red, white, and blue uniforms, and we'd perform at the school, and then we'd perform for the parents, and then we'd go to other schools and perform. And I found myself feeling more comfortable performing in front of other people than I ever felt in the gym with a basketball or outside with a baseball. I remember being involved in a little school play and how exciting it was when we finally performed and I got to miss class so that I could be in this little play. And I remember an arts and crafts class and an arts and crafts room where we would do ceramics and paint ceramics and work with clay. And I think, gosh, I don't know if kids today are getting those same rich, creative opportunities. I remember dance festivals and going and dancing with my class and dancing with another class because they needed more boys. They didn't have enough boys. And I just remember getting very involved with that. I remember my mom taught second grade when we came back to Utah, and I'd go down and help her in her classroom. I'd set up the bulletin boards, and I'd help get the room arranged, and I'd go down and tutor children and give presentations in her classroom about what I was learning or studying. And I think it was in those moments that I began to feel a deep desire to be a teacher. In fact, I was the only fourth grader in the history of the world who had a bulletin board file. I literally had a file of bulletin board ideas. When my teachers at my school found out that I'd go down and do bulletin boards for my mom, and I liked the artistic creativity and coming up with borders, and when they found out that I liked to do that, oh my goodness, they put me to work. And so I'd spend my recesses in the classrooms putting up bulletin boards, and in the library putting up bulletin boards, and going in and putting pictures on a big overhead projector and then tracing out the pictures and coloring them with chalk. And I guess I just felt a sense of audience. I felt it in the singing, I felt it in the play, I felt it in presenting for the bulletin boards and my art. And I guess that's what influenced me as I got older, because I always felt like what I was doing was for a real audience. It was for real people. And so I never felt like I was jumping hoops in school. I never felt like I was just saying, okay, well, I have to do this. Why? For school. There was always a bigger why for me. And I think that influenced me later in my life, because I got a voice early on. I felt like what I had to say, what I had to do, what I created was something that people really used. It was on a real bulletin board. It was a real performance. And that made a difference. And all of that kind of laid the groundwork for my love of writing. I remember they had a little class of creative writing, and I found out later that the principal had arranged the class just for me, because he could see that I had a talent for this, that I liked it, and he wanted me to have a place where I could succeed. Vermont Harward was his name, and his daughter ended up marrying my brother. But Vermont noticed in me something that he could foster and nurture. And he probably also noticed that I wasn't doing too well when it came to the sports and the circle of friends that most kids had. And so he gave me this opportunity to kind of be in a little creative writing class. And that started me in a lifelong love of writing and publishing. My fifth grade teacher came into the classroom one day and said, "We're going to write a book." And I don't know what it was about that got me so enthused, but she said, "We're going to write a book, and it's going to be in the library, and it can be read by real people." And that just made me feel so motivated. And my friend and I wrote a little book, and she sent it down to the high school, and the typing class typed it up as one of their assignments, and we got to illustrate it, and then it got a real hard cover with a little cardboard cover, and it was put in the library. And I don't know if anybody even saw that book. I still have a copy of it, but oh, that just turned me on to writing and helped me understand that my influence, what I'd learned, what I felt, what I thought actually could matter to someone else. So it was there in elementary school that I discovered the joy of finding out what was inside of me and bringing it out. When we read or when we sit in a lesson, we see the world from the outside in. We see the world and it's being put inside of us. But I feel very blessed because I had early childhood experiences, teachers who were caring and loving, parents who fostered my creativity and gave me a chance to also see the world from the inside out. And I'll always be thankful for that. Middle school was a difficult time for me. My best friend in elementary school was a young man named Jeff Bain, and he was a Navajo who had come on the placement program and was living with a family in our ward. And he and I became great friends. We were taking piano lessons at the same time, and we loved playing our little piano pieces for each other, and we were involved with scouts together, and he had a great sense of humor, and so he'd make me laugh, and we even became blood brothers. We cut our fingers and we touched our fingers together so that we could be blood brothers. And he was kind of my security in the school and church setting. And then he didn't come back. So as I left elementary school and started middle school, my best friend was gone and I didn't have a lot of other friends. And so I started middle school at a real disadvantage. In sixth grade, they had done a big citywide program, and I had been selected to be the MC, to do a little talk at the beginning and announce what was going on and announce the theme of the evening. And at the time, I thought, wow, that's a great experience. And, I got to stand in the spotlight for a minute. But when I got to junior high, then all these other kids who'd come from other schools, they knew me, and they knew me because of that. And so then I became a target for their teasing. So they would tease me because I had done that program, and they, I look back now and I realize it was just insecurities. Gosh, everybody's coming from all these different schools, and everybody is trying to, make look good by making other people look stupid. And somehow in that pecking order, I ended up down at the bottom of the list. And so it was very difficult for me. The support I had felt from teachers in elementary school, suddenly I was with new teachers who didn't know me, and the school was much bigger, and it was difficult. I remember being in a school choir, which is what I had loved in elementary school, but then in junior high, I found out it's not cool to be a boy who likes to sing. And I would go to the PE classes that were required, but felt very out of place there. And because I didn't have the skills that I needed to be able to participate and do well, then, again, I became the target of bullying and teasing. And so those were difficult days. But I think the thing that got me through was knowing that my parents loved me, my family loved me, had a great friend in my cousin Jerry, my little brother Chris, and our cousin Perry, and Jerry and I would all pal around together, and we'd play board games, and we'd pick cherries together, and so I had a base of acceptance and validation that made me feel good about myself. And I had the church. I was grateful for the gospel, and I was grateful for teachers in the church that believed in me and that had taught me that God loves me and that He values me and that He that I was important and special to Him. And so somehow that got me through the hard times at school. I never saw the rejection of my peers, and sometimes it got pretty fierce. they would threaten to beat me up. They would spit on me in the halls. They would tease me and call me names. But somehow that never sunk in. I didn't see their rejection as evidence that I wasn't good or that I wasn't valuable or that I didn't matter. Instead, I saw it as evidence that they didn't know me. I thought, gosh, if they knew me the way Jerry knows me, then they'd like me. If they knew me the way my parents and brothers know me, then they'd like me. If they knew me the way my grandma Kamenish knows me, then they would like me. Gosh, if they knew me the way the people at church know me, then they would like me. And I look back now and I see that that's what helped me weather the storm of middle school, was just knowing who I was and caring deeply about what God thought of me. And that helped me kind of push aside the fact that they didn't think much of me. So yeah, junior high was kind of a dark time, but things started to look up when a young man moved in named Steve Perry, and he had moved from Logan. And we ended up meeting, and I believe it was it might have been in seminary during 9th grade. I remember we were a district in our seminary class, and he was the district leader, so we became Stevie's Wonders. That was the name we chose for ourselves. And I think that we also met up in a PE class because he didn't like sports either. And so that friendship really started to change my life. And I'll be forever grateful for the influence of Steve as we went through high school together and as we got involved with a little play when I was in 9th grade that was called Saturday's Warrior. When I was in 9th grade, my mom brought home a little piece of paper saying they were having auditions for a musical. And at that point, I felt like, gosh, I don't know whether I would have had the courage to do that if it were a school thing. But because it was outside of the school, then I thought, hey, none of the kids at school will be there. They won't see me singing. They won't see me performing, and they won't make fun of me. Well, I went to the audition, and nobody had really heard of this play, but it turned out to be quite a big deal and a turning point in the church as far as Doug Stewart and Lex D'Azevedo creating kind of the first Mormon musical and showing that we could have a message that was based in church culture, and we could have music that was as great as anything that was being performed in the world, and that it could that we could create our own art. And so I got to be a part of that. Now, at this point, people look back and they say, oh, the play was a little corny, or it was a little silly. But in its day, it was quite a turning point, and everyone was very excited about it. Well, I got in this play, and I didn't tell anybody at school about it, but as I would perform in the play, then I was performing with a lot of college students. And that really built my self-esteem because the college students accepted me. They thought I was talented. They thought I was funny. I remember one of the students would come and pick me up and take me to rehearsals. And we'd get a little group together and do a carpool down to where the play was being performed. And she would just laugh and laugh and laugh as I would tell her what was going on at school, or as I would tell her what was going on in my life. And I thought, wow, they're in college and they think I'm cool. And so it was one more validation. It was one more assurance that the kids at school, the kids at my school, were wrong, and that I really was good and that I really was worthwhile. Well, then the interesting thing was that play was such a hit. It was such a popular thing. It was sold out every night. And so a lot of the kids at the school started going to the play. And then when they would see me in the play, and when the word got around the school that not only was I in the play, but I was getting paid for it, that I was a professional actor, then that really built me in their eyes. And suddenly, instead of looking at me like a loser, suddenly they looked at me like I was somebody important. And that was a wonderful turning point for me. We were in the play, Steve Perry was in the play with me, and we were in the play all summer long and performed in Salt Lake to sold out audiences and many general authorities who came. And so it was a very exciting time for me, and a time that built me up and gave me a great deal of confidence as I was heading into high school. I entered Provo High on feeling like I could just conquer the world. I was doing well academically. I had a friend in Steve Perry, and because I had been in Saturday's Warrior, I had discovered that I had a real talent for music and a talent for performing, and I just wanted to do that and nothing else. So I got involved in the choirs, and I got involved in the what they called it highbrows, but it was like the specialty choir, the elite choir. And I tried out for plays, and I got in the plays, even though I was a sophomore, and it was unheard of for a sophomore to get a speaking part in a play. And so teachers like Richard Barker, who was my choir teacher, and Ray Jones, who was my drama teacher, these men just made such a difference in my life as they gave me opportunities to shine and opportunities to make new friends. In the choir, in the plays, suddenly my social circle expanded, and I was able to make good friends. I think at this point I had enough confidence that not only was I able to expand my circle of friendship, but I was able to reach out to others who were struggling. My time in junior high gave me great empathy for people who were feeling left out. And ever since then, I have always had an eye toward the one who's outside the circle. I have always had a soft spot for the underdog, because that was what I felt like in junior high. So in high school, I reached out in service and tried to befriend those who seemed friendless, and just had some wonderful growing experiences. I became involved with forensics and would go to speech competitions and started doing very well. And again, it reinforced what I had learned in elementary school, and that is that I had a voice and that people wanted to hear from me, and that I had something to say. I remember going to the national competition in oratory and placing in the nationals, and it just solidified for me this feeling that not only did I have a lot to learn, but I had a lot to teach others. As my confidence grew, I was willing to try to get involved in the school. I would get involved with decorating for the dances, and I would get involved with the pep assemblies. And finally, as a senior, I remember being the mascot for the school and dressing up in a bulldog costume and going out and cheering at the games. I couldn't even see what was going on. And remember, I wasn't that good at sports, so I didn't even know what was going on. But when the cheerleaders would cheer, I would cheer. And I remember getting involved with student government and being the student body vice president. And just being able to reach out to others and try to say hi to people and befriend everyone. I think my circle of friends in high school went far beyond those that I associated with in student government or in plays or in choir or in forensics. My circle started to include everyone, even athletes and even people who had gone astray from the church. I think they all found a friend in me because I was willing to care about them. And so when at my senior dinner dance, they were passing out awards like, most, best looking senior or most likely to succeed or the funniest senior or, the most preferred. I didn't win any of those awards, but I won an award that meant more to me than my schoolmates would ever know. And I was named Most Loved Senior. I still have the little green heart, a little green heart box thing that they gave me in front of the senior class. And I remember my classmates cheering for me when I was named Most Loved Senior. And I kind of looked around the room, and there were kids who had bullied me in junior high. There were kids who had teased me mercilessly and even spit on me. But there they were, cheering for me. And I think I learned that as you care a little less about yourself and focus a little more on others, then that makes the difference. Instead of going to school and worrying about, where I was in the social food chain, where I was in the popularity poll of the school, or going to school and wondering if I had my friends there, I went to school worrying more about what other people were feeling and what other people were needing and wanting to be a friend to others. And because of that, then I found the acceptance that I hadn't found earlier. And I'll always be, very thankful for that. Another memory from high school had to do with a wonderful teacher named Chloe Vroman. She taught writing. She was an English teacher, but she taught a class in creative writing. Now remember, in elementary school, I had gotten very focused and excited about writing. And finally, by high school, I was willing to admit that openly again. In junior high, I didn't want anybody to know that I liked writing because boys were supposed to like football and beating each other up, and I didn't. But by high school, I felt confident enough to share my writing once again. I'd always been writing. I'd always kept a journal. My mom and dad were wonderful role models of literacy. But I just didn't dare share it with anyone. And then Mrs. Roman said, in this class, we're not just going to write for a grade. She said, that's not what real writers do. She said, you're going to write and you're going to submit your writing for publication. Now, I look back now and I just realize how far ahead of her time she was. She was teaching us a writing process that other teachers were not focused on at all. She was teaching us to write for a real audience and help us figure out what we wanted to write about when other teachers were just assigning topics and grading papers and jumping hoops. And so that was a very exciting time for me as I started submitting my work and found that people were enjoying it. I remember writing a story for the New Era and submitting it because we had to for class, and then getting it published, and how exciting that was. I didn't dare submit my writing beyond the, I thought, well, I'll submit it to the patriotic program contest or the PTA contest, because everybody that enters gets a donut, and so I'll be happy to enter those contests. But I wasn't thinking bigger than that until Mrs. Roman came to our classroom and said, there's a national writing contest sponsored by Guidepost magazine, and it's a youth writing contest, and I think that some of you should enter. Well, I thought, a national magazine? No way. A national contest? There's no way. So I didn't worry about getting anything ready, and nobody else in the class did either. And when Mrs. Roman finally said, who has entered that contest? And nobody raised a hand, that's when she got mad. And she said, everybody has to enter this contest, and if you don't enter, you don't get a grade, and you don't graduate from high school. Well, I thought, whoa, she's serious about this. I didn't even know if a teacher could do that, but I wasn't going to find out. So I went ahead and wrote up a story about my mom, and my mom helped me edit it, and we sent it into the magazine, and I forgot that I'd even entered until I got a letter telling me I'd placed in the top 10. Well, that got me excited. Mrs. Roman was so excited. She says, Brad, you're in the top 10. And I said, well, there were probably only 11 entries, and they were probably all from our class because you forced everyone to enter. She called the offices in New York and found out that there'd been thousands of entries, and I was in the top 10, and the senior staff editor was going to come and visit me. Now, at the time, I didn't realize he was checking for plagiarism. Before they gave an award or published the story, they wanted to make sure that the work was, authentic and not plagiarized. But I didn't know that at the time. I just thought he was coming to meet me because I was so great. So he came and got to have lunch with the principal and got my picture in the newspaper and got to even talk to him about the church. And my parents and I gave him a Book of Mormon and the whole 9 yards. And then a little later, I got a telegram. I tell kids today that a telegram was like a very expensive text message. And I got a telegram from a man that a lot of people don't remember, but an incredible man named Norman Vincent Peale. He was the author of The Power of Positive Thinking. And he was a man who really turned the world upside down with that book and with all of his other writings and his speaking. Well, he sent me a personal telegram telling me I'd placed first place in the contest. It meant that they were going to publish my story in the magazine. It meant that they were going to give me a scholarship for school. And it meant that they were going to put me on the cover of the magazine. And so that was a turning point for me to have that little story come out my senior year and to get a scholarship that would allow me to go to school, which was never a question, but it just gave me the encouragement that not only could I go to college, but that I could succeed at college. And the story was read by a man named George Bickerstaff, who was an editor at Bookcraft Publishing in Salt Lake City. And he sent me a letter and said he wanted to meet me. And meeting George Bickerstaff led to the opportunity to write a book. And I did. That's a story for another day. But I wrote the Super Baruba Success Book for underachievers, overexpectors, and other ordinary people. The title was longer than the book. And I had that incredible opportunity to publish that book to write it when I was 18 and have it published when I turned 19 and was just ready to go out on my mission. And that started a whole lifelong love of writing and publishing, and I've since had the chance to publish many, many books. But it all started with that one. And it all started with a man who said, Brad, I believe in young people, and I believe in you, and you can do this. You've learned some things that you can share, and I'm going to give you the very rare opportunity to share that at a young age. And so those are wonderful memories from high school. I'll always be grateful for the influence of teachers and good examples in my peers, and always be grateful for the chance to share what was inside of me and write about my life and about the things I feel passionate about, which definitely includes the gospel of Jesus Christ. Another wonderful memory of growing up had to do with singing the songs written by Janice Kapp. My friend Steve Perry was a lifesaver for me in high school, and we loved to sing together. We would always do duets. We would get with some girls and do quartets. We tried out for an all-American choir in the year 1976, the bicentennial, and we got to go and perform at Independence Hall. We got to perform at Carnegie Hall. We toured all over Europe. And so we had some great times together. And I look back and just feel like my life was so enriched by my friendship with him and our love of music. We were taking voice lessons together from the same teacher and just enjoying developing our talents. Well, about the same time, his mom started developing her talents. She was very into sports and loved sports, and all of her callings in church had to do with being the athletic director or the coach. And then she broke her ankle or her leg or something when she was playing basketball with her nephew. And her husband said, Janie, maybe you better try developing another talent. She says, I don't have any other talents. And he said, well, in college you were involved with music, so why don't you do something with your music? Well, about that time, they were doing a road show in our state. And they announced that if there was original music, then the ward would get extra points. So she wrote some original songs for the road show, and that kind of was how she started writing her music. I remember her playing I'll Follow Jesus and Where is Heaven and some of her very first songs that she wrote, and teaching them to Steve and me, and we would figure out a little harmony, and then we would sing wherever she was speaking. So she would go to a relief society and speak, and we would sing her songs. Every time she'd do a lesson, she'd write a song for the lesson, and we'd sing. She was asked to write a little program about family history, and so we would perform the program. And it was a great opportunity to perform and sing and to be with my friend. But it was also a chance for my testimony to grow, because her songs were all very focused on the gospel. And so as she would write songs like A Young Boy Prayed, and I would sing the song, then I internalized those lyrics and I internalized that message. And I remember singing at a education week right before I left on my mission. In fact, we got the opportunity to get out of the MTC to sing when she was presenting at Education Week. And I sang A Young Boy Prayed, and man, I sang it from my whole heart because it was a message that wasn't just coming from Sister Perry, but it was coming from me. And I loved that. I loved being able to sing with Steve, and I loved being a part of watching Sister Perry's music spread throughout the whole church, and feeling like in some small way I had my hand in the influence that she was having and the good that she was doing. Right after high school, I went to Idaho State University for a summer to participate in the summer theater program that was there. It was kind of my first time away from home and living in the dorms, and there were a lot of life lessons that were learned. I remember being there when the announcement was made that President Spencer W. Kimball had received a revelation extending the blessings of the priesthood to all worthy males, regardless of race. I remember how exciting that was to know that my friend, Mary Sturlockson, who later became Mary Sturlockson Iyer, she had lived with the Ellis family in my ward, and so I had become good friends with her. She was a black student who had come to BYU, and I remember feeling the thrill of that revelation at even a deeper level, because I knew what this meant for my friend Mary. And she actually did end up becoming the first sister missionary who was black. She served in San Antonio, Texas. But I think because I saw the revelation through her eyes, it just meant so much more to me. But then at the end of the summer, Steve Perry had been touring during the summer with a play called My Turn on Earth. And he called me and said, Brad, the other guy in the play is going on a mission. His name was Tracy Ward. And the interesting thing is that later in my life, I served as his counselor when he was the stake president for a stake at BYU for freshmen in Heritage Halls. So our paths crossed when we were young, and then our paths crossed again when we were older. But he decided he was going to go on his mission, and so he left, and they were looking for somebody to fill his place. Well, Steve asked me to audition, and I did, and I got in the touring company of the play, and there were 5 actors in the play, 3 girls and 2 boys. So it was a very small cast and a small group that was touring around, and that was a great experience for me. Instead of starting college the fall after my senior year, after my graduation, I spent that semester touring the United States. A wonderful travel opportunity, a wonderful chance to bond with these other performers, and a chance for me to realize that not only could I perform, not only could I sing the songs and say the parts, but I could also teach. As I traveled with them, then we realized everywhere we'd go, we'd do firesides. And I realized that I was starting to like the firesides more than the show. The play was the same thing every night, but the firesides were always fresh. In the play, I couldn't see the audience, but in the firesides, I could see the faces. I could see how they were responding to what I was saying. And so it kind of awakened in me this love of teaching that helped me throughout my mission and helped me later in my life. Kind of was my first introduction to speaking in the church, which then later would become a huge part of my life. Well, we would perform in this play and travel around, and then when we got back, I started school winter semester at BYU, and we were performing in Salt Lake at that point. So the play would be performing in the evenings and on the weekends when I was in school during the day. And so I enjoyed the Salt Lake run, and especially the opportunity that we had to meet President Spencer W. Kimball. We got word that he was going to come to the play for family night with his family. Now, a lot of families went to that play for family night, but that one had me a little nervous and a little excited to think that I was going to be performing in front of the prophet. I remember the evening. I remember that everyone stood up when he came into the theater. And I remember being able to just share the music and the evening. And then we got word that he wanted to meet the cast. So after the play, there we were in our costumes and our makeup, and we were hustled down to a basement parking garage, a parking lot where his car was waiting for him. And so we all got to stand there, and the director at the time was introducing us to President Kimball. Now, we just finished the play. I mean, my gosh, I was sweating, and we were there in our costumes, and we all got to meet him. Well, as the director introduced me to President Kimball, he said, "This is Brad," and he just put in his mission papers. And so the prophet said to me, "So where are you going on your mission?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I thought you knew." And the director, I just remember his face. He was just cringing. He couldn't believe that I said that because I was just trying to be funny. And President Kimball did think it was funny. So I felt grateful for that. He just laughed and laughed. He thought that was so clever. And then he asked me what I was doing in the church. And I said, "Well, right now I'm teaching the 12-year-olds in Sunday school." And he said, "There's no more important calling in the church. What did you teach them yesterday?" And all I remembered was that I had told them that I was going to have this chance to meet President Kimball. And I had asked them, "What would you say if you had the chance to meet the prophet?" And they had all said different things. I mean, one kid asked if they had to wear makeup during General Conference, and another kid wanted to invite President Kimball to go water skiing with him down at Lake Powell. But there was one girl in the class who said, "If I met President Kimball, I'd tell him that I love him." And so I said, "President Kimball, they told me that they would tell you that they love you. I love you." And then he held me. He just reached out his arms and he embraced me and held me in his arms. And when my mission call came, I didn't wonder whether that's what I should be doing. I didn't wonder if that's where I should be going, because I had felt such love from the prophet who had signed my mission call. Looking back, I think that was my first encounter with prophets, seers, revelators. It was my first encounter with a representative of Jesus Christ. And the Christ-like love that I felt from him became a base for a lifelong love that I have a lifelong love that I feel for the brethren. I love their words. I read their books. I read their biographies. I love their examples. I love their lives. I've had a chance to meet some, but I think I feel a deep respect and love for these brethren, and that goes back to that wonderful chance that I had to meet President Kimball when we were doing that play, My Turn on Earth. I had to be Satan in front of the prophet. I mean, gosh, I'm glad he didn't tell me I did a good job. One little instant with him, something that I'm sure he would never remember because he met so many people and had so many similar experiences, but that one little instant with him was certainly a life changer for me. I met my wife, Debi, really quickly after I got home from my mission because I met her twin brother, Doug, and I was super impressed with him. I thought he was the greatest guy ever. And I said, "You don't happen to have a twin sister I could marry?" And he said, "I do." And I said, no way. Seriously, a twin? And he said, yeah, she's in Guatemala on her mission. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. I've got to meet her. So when she got home from her mission a few weeks later, Doug invited me to the welcome home. And so that was the first time I met Debi. And she always laughs because she says I came in late and that I was hugging her whole family. And she thought, who is this guy? He doesn't even know my family and he's hugging them. But I sat and listened to her report her mission. And I have to be honest, I didn't have any voice in my head that said, that is the girl you're going to marry. But I definitely said, that's the type of girl I want to marry. I was so impressed with her depth of testimony, her sparkle in her eye, her fun memories of the mission. But I just was so drawn to her spirit. Yes, she's a beautiful girl, but I was so drawn to her spirit and her light. And I thought, man, I could marry a girl like that. Well, we ended up dating, and her mother kind of scared me to death because she started planning the wedding. You know, now as an adult, I can see where she was coming from. But at the time I thought, good grief, I'm a freshman in college. I don't have a job. And she was saying, oh, you two are perfect for each other. Let's plan the wedding. Let's set the date. And I know she was just kind of kidding, but it was a serious kidding, and it scared me. I look back now and I laugh at our first dates because my first date was inviting her to go water skiing. And now that I know her so well, I realize that getting in a swimsuit and getting in the water, especially at the time when she was wearing contacts, that was not her idea of fun, but she was willing to do it and be a good sport. Her first invitation for me was to come to a family reunion and play softball. Well, now she knows that my background, and she knows that I am just not an athlete at all. And there I was praying that that ball would not come my direction. I would just get out in that outfield and just pray that nobody would hit the ball toward me. So yeah, I look back at our first dates and have to just smile because we just had a lot to learn about each other. But one of our first dates was also to the temple. And I think going with her, knowing she was a returned missionary, and being able to be in the temple helped me realize that this was a girl who put God first in her life. This was a girl who was focused on the right things. And that impressed me a great deal. Then we went out for Mexican food, and we've always loved that as well. So there were a lot of firsts. My first kiss with her was, I got home in the summer of 81, and then we were dating a little bit off and on. And then my first kiss was on Valentine's of 82. And I was taking her to a dance up at BYU that one of the stakes was putting on. So we went and had a fun time dancing. And then we went to, I took her home to drop her off. And we were talking about favorite movies. And for some reason, Romeo and Juliet came up. This is the old version. This is the Franco Zeffirelli version with Leonard Whiting and Olivia Hussey. And I can't remember whether she said that was her favorite movie or I said it, but I said, oh my gosh, yeah, I love that movie too. She said, oh, I had the biggest crush on Leonard Whiting. And I said, oh, I had a big crush on Olivia Hussey. I had a huge crush on her. And so we were talking outside of her house on the doorstep. And so finally I said to her, look, you close your eyes and you pretend you're Leonard Whiting, that you pretend I'm Leonard Whiting, and I'll close my eyes and I'll pretend you're Olivia Hussey. And that's when we kissed. So kind of fun memories of meeting Debi. When I got back from my mission, I was at BYU, and every class I took, I decided I would make my major. because I loved everything. I just love learning. So I take an English class and decide I wanted to major in English. And then I take a history class and decide I wanted to major in history. Then I wanted to do journalism. And then I wanted to do public relations. And then I wanted to do, I was all over the place. I wanted to major in music. I loved everything. And finally, my dad said to me, Brad, you need to take one of those career exploration classes. And I said, Dad, those are for the people who don't know what they're doing. And he said, you ought to take one of those career exploration classes. And so I did, and we got to take an aptitude test. Now, I'd taken an aptitude test in high school, and it said I should be a priest or a rabbi. And that's not good news for a little Mormon kid. So they said, we're going to do an aptitude test. And I said, hey, I already did one of those in high school, and it just said I should be a priest or a rabbi. And the teacher started laughing and said, well, this is BYU. We took that one off. And so I thought, well, what's next on the list? I took the aptitude test, and it said I should be an elementary school teacher. And I still remember coming out of the Spencer W. Kimball Tower, walking to the stairs that went down to the Richards building and thinking, why did it say that? Why did it say that? What did I write or what did I do that would make that come up? And because even if I'd thought about education, I'd thought about secondary ed, and I couldn't decide what I wanted to teach, whether I wanted to do speech and drama or whether I wanted to do history or, gosh, I was even excited at the thought of teaching driver's ed. So I couldn't decide what I would teach. But suddenly I thought, wow, elementary, gosh, I could teach everything. And then all of a sudden, all the memories of working in my mom's classroom flooded back, and all the memories of my elementary school experience, and all the memories of doing bulletin board after bulletin board. And I thought, hey, I've already got the bulletin board file. What else do I need? I should go into elementary education. And so I did, and I never looked back. I've always been grateful I did that. It did give me a chance to have a lot of variety, and it gave me a chance to work with kids, and I loved that. And it gave me a chance to be a professional. I was able to have some control over my own choices in that classroom. I was able to see needs and meet those needs. I was able to bring everything that I had learned together and try to reach kids. And when the teacher's manual didn't work, then I could go a different direction. And I was grateful that I had a career where I could truly be a professional in every sense of the word. And I loved feeling like I could make a difference. And I knew that as a teacher, I could make a difference in the lives of these kids and in their futures, partly because I knew the difference that teachers had made in my life. And I knew the difference that my parents had made as teachers. So I went into education and never looked back. I loved it. Debi and I were married October 7th, I better get this right, 1982. Yeah, because I served my mission from 79 to 81, and then we got married in October of 82. We waited to get married over the summer because I was touring with Janice Kapp Perry's play, It's a Miracle. And so I was out of town a lot. And then we decided as long as we were waiting for the fall, we might as well wait until my brother, Chris, got home from his mission in Ohio. And I'm always grateful that we waited so that the whole family could be there when we got married. But we were so crazy. We got married on a weekend. I mean, my goodness, I think we got married on a Friday and went on our honeymoon to Hotel Utah in Salt Lake on Saturday, got home Sunday and was ready to go back to work. She was working part-time as a nurse at the hospital, and I was back in school. And we were back at it on Monday. So, I mean, now I look back and I think, oh, we were so dumb. Why didn't we take a little more time for a honeymoon and a little more time to make that adjustment? But we didn't. We just fit it in, and I remember being so nervous on the day of my marriage. I mean, I would perform in front of hundreds and thousands of people. I would speak in front of groups. I would teach without ever getting nervous. And yet, when I went into that sealing room, I was just so nervous. And it wasn't that I wondered if Debi was like not the one. My nervousness wasn't about that, and my love for her was real. I just was so scared about being able to provide, which is funny because actually Debi was the provider as she helped me get through school working as a nurse. My parents were the providers as they let us live in the little remodeled chicken coop that was a rental. I mean, I look back now and I think, what was I nervous about? But I think I just felt the responsibility of being the husband and being the provider. And I wanted so much to step into that role and take that and succeed with it. But, I look back now and I think, there was nothing to be so nervous about. But I was nervous about that. I had asked Debi to marry me. I was teaching Sunday school at the MTC. I wasn't teaching Spanish, but I was teaching on Sundays. And so I would teach a huge room full of missionaries. The Sunday school lesson, they called it gospel study. And I enjoyed that. I loved it. It was a great way for me to still feel engaged and involved with missionaries. And one night I went down to say goodbye to one of the groups that was going to be leaving the next day. So I went to the dorms and got to say goodbye to them and give them all some abrazos. And then as I came out of the MTC, then I went over to the temple, Provo temple, and just walked around the temple. It was, I look back now and Debi says she actually felt a prompting that I was going to ask her to marry me that night. But I really didn't have that in my head, I don't think, as I was marching her around the temple over and over and over and just talking about life and our futures and marriages that I had seen that seemed to work and what made a marriage work and what made her parents' marriage work and what made my parents' marriage work. And that poor girl, I walked her around the temple so many times, I think we got enough exercise to last us a year. But finally there at the side of the Provo temple, I proposed to her and asked her to marry me. And we went and told her parents, and they were her mom was so excited. Her dad was just kind of like, oh, that's nice. And then we went to tell my parents, and my mom was so excited, and my dad was kind of like, that's nice, it's late, I need to go to bed. But the next morning, I went to bed that night so excited and happy, and then the next morning I woke up in a panic. I was like, what the heck, what have I done? And I went upstairs and I said, Mom, did what I think happened last night really happen? And she said, yes. And she said, you go get some flowers right now and you take them out there and you tell her that she has made you the happiest man in the world. I said, oh, but I'm so nervous. Maybe I'm jumping into this too quickly because I don't have a job. See, remember, for me, it was all about, I don't have any way to provide for her. And my mom just reminded me, that's not what it's about. She says, you go tell that girl how much you love her. So I did. I bought some flowers and I took them out to her and told her how happy I was. And then that calmed me down, and I just felt very grateful that Debi was willing to marry me. Oh gosh, I look back now and I think I was so young. She was a little older than I was, and she was willing to marry me when I was a freshman at BYU. Crazy. We got married and lived in the chicken coop. When my parents first got married, they asked my mom's father and mother if they could live in the chicken coop. Well, they thought it was so funny. They said, sure, you can live there. And so my mom and dad cleaned it out, literally cleaned out the chicken coop, kind of remodeled it into a home, and lived there when they were first married. And then they used it as a rental. I would always go over there and babysit for whatever couple was renting at the time when I was growing up. And so when my brother Roger got married to Moana, they lived there in the chicken coop, and then they had moved out. And so I thought, well, gosh, maybe mom and dad would let us live in the chicken coop to get started. Good grief. I moved in there and never left, because we ended up living there while I was in school, and then living there while I was teaching school, and then even when I went back to get my master's. So we lived in that little chicken coop for quite a while, but it had a slanted roof and all the windows on the south side where the sun could get in, and it literally was an old remodeled chicken coop. But we have some wonderful memories there of starting our lives and starting our family and just building our future together. So I guess we can say that it all started in a chicken coop. When I was at BYU, I was touring with a play called It's a Miracle. It was by Janice Kapp. So I'd perform on the weekends and then do school during the week. And we would do firesides on Sunday nights. And I really enjoyed the interaction at the fireside. I enjoyed the teaching. I enjoyed being able to bear my testimony. That was something I couldn't do in the public school setting. So as much as I loved teaching, I really loved teaching about the gospel and bearing my testimony of the gospel. And that kind of grew into something that has become a major part of my life. When I graduated in 1985, that was in April, and I was planning on teaching the next fall. I'd gotten a job at Edgemont Elementary School in Provo, but I knew I needed something to do for the summer that might bring in a little extra money. And I had a friend, Craig Bradley, who had been a missionary with me in Chile, and he was working for youth and family programs at BYU. And so he called one day and said, Brad, we do outreach youth conferences, and there's a youth conference in Colorado, and the speaker can't go. One of the speakers is sick, so could you go and fill in for him? He says, I told my boss that you could do it because I know you're good at this sort of thing. So I went in and had an interview with a man named Glenn McClure, and he said, now remember, this is just for this time. We're not looking for anybody new. We're not looking for any new speakers. This is just filling in on this one weekend. Well, I filled in. I went to Colorado, fell in love with teaching the youth in those youth conference settings, and I've been doing it ever since. That one-time only experience just started growing into something that I would do for years and years and years of my life. I did outreach youth conferences through May and June, and then I was invited to speak at especially for youth. The program had started in '76, about 9 years earlier, because this was '85. And so it was about 10 years old. It was just there at BYU. It hadn't grown into the big program yet that it is today, but I was hooked. Being able to teach the youth and having them come and be so hungry to learn the gospel, I just loved it. My principal had come to me and said, do you want a summer job working at the science camp that the school district did up the canyon at Big Springs? And I thought, well, maybe I could get involved with that. And I look back now and I think, gosh, if I had gone that direction, then maybe this direction never would have opened up. And as I made that choice to work with summer youth programs at BYU rather than the school district science camp, that just charted a path for my whole life and has turned into a a huge, wonderful part of who I am. So that was the first summer I spoke it at EFY, and I've been doing it almost every summer since. I have loved teaching the youth. I've loved interacting with them. I've loved being there at turning point times in their life. A study was just done that said, what's been the most impactful thing in your spiritual development? Asking people about their teenage years. And seminary surfaced as being impactful, and it was for me as well. But EFY has surfaced as being just as impactful. It tied. I mean, seminaries for a whole year and EFY's for 1 week in the summer. And yet it truly does have that impact. And I sensed that. I sensed it early on. And it gave me a place where I could make the difference that I wanted to make, not just by teaching, but by connecting kids with the gospel, by connecting them with the Spirit, by focusing them on Jesus Christ. And so those youth programs, whether it was the outreach conferences that would go around the country, or EFY, and I'll forever be grateful to Ron Hills, who was the founder of that program, for believing in me, giving me a shot. I mean, I was young. I was fresh off my own mission. I mean, I had just barely graduated from college. Most of the other speakers were middle-aged. They were seminary teachers. But he took a chance on me and gave me an opportunity to teach and direct at basically the same age that most of the counselors were who were working with the program. Back then, the program was all summer long. I mean, we would just teach and work every week, all summer. New group of kids would come in, and the same counselors, the same teachers, the same session directors would just work all summer long. And it became a great joy in my life. And so I would teach school during the year, and I'd do EFY during the summer, and I'd do youth conferences during the weekends throughout the year. And I am grateful for Debi, who was so patient. There we were with our young children, but she was so patient. She knew that the thing that mattered more to me than anything else was feeling like I made a difference. I wasn't motivated much by money. I mean, obviously, I became an elementary school teacher. And I wasn't motivated by fame or getting attention that way. I think I'd had plenty of attention and notoriety because of the plays that I'd been in. And that wasn't motivating me. The thing that motivated me was just a deep need to feel like I was making a difference, and that the things I was doing were bringing people closer to Christ and helping them strengthen their testimonies. And EFY has given me a chance to do that through many, many years. I still work with the program. I still love it. And Debi says, when are you going to quit? And I say, I don't know. Maybe I'll be the only 92-year-old speaker who's still telling kids about dating and dancing. But it has given me a deep sense of significance and has shaped me. My writing has been an extension of my teaching. And as I teach the youth, I would see needs, and my writing became a way of trying to meet the needs that I was seeing as I interacted with the youth. And so all things in my life kind of revolve around that. And I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had, for the people it's given me a chance to meet, and for the impact it's had on my own family and kids. I look back and I just feel like, gosh, I've had a very rich life because of the chances that I've had to enrich the lives of others. I received my mission call to serve in Chile, Viña del Mar. I didn't know it when I read it on the paper, but I was one of the first 15 missionaries to receive a call to that brand new mission that had been divided off of Santiago North. And so we were starting a new mission. And little did I know the part that Chile would play in my life, and little did I know the role that my mission president, Gerald J. Day, would play in my life. But I will be forever thankful for the chance I had to serve in that country and for the influence of that wonderful, wonderful man in my life. When I got through the MTC, we went to Chile, and I realized it was hard. I'd lived abroad before. I grew up in Africa. I remember traveling in Europe as a teenager. So I had been abroad, but I didn't ever have to learn a language. And when I got to Chile and realized that I was going to have to learn Spanish, I mean, in the MTC it was hard, but then I got down to Chile and realized that this wasn't just a subject that I was studying on the side. This was something that I really had to do in order to survive. And it was hard. I think for the first month, I lived in a place called Quilpué, and it was a tricky transition for me. I was getting used to the culture. I wasn't understanding anything. I was missing home. I was feeling kind of far away. And at the end of that month, I got transferred to a little desert town up in the north of the mission called Vallenar. And there were only 2 missionaries in the town, so we were very alone. And the branch was small, and I was just trying so hard to learn, and the work was hard, and the sun was hot, and I was missing home. And I remember one day thinking, why am I doing this? Why on earth am I doing this? But, I knew the answer. I was there for God. God called me. God needed me, and I was there. And then, for the first time in my growing up Mormon life, I thought, where's God? And I'd never had that thought before. I had never had that doubt before. I had always loved the church. I had always felt close to God. I'd always felt His love. And suddenly, I felt very alone. And I didn't feel Him close. And so I thought, well, where's God? And I thought, even if He's there, with all of His numberless children on numberless worlds, does He even know that I'm here? Does He even care that I'm struggling? I remember going home that day, and my companion noticed that I was feeling a little discouraged, and he said, what's going on? And I said, I don't know. I think I lost my testimony today. And he started to laugh. He says, oh my gosh, you were so funny. He says, you always crack me up. Now go wash so that we can eat. And so I went into the bathroom and I was washing up, and I thought, oh no, this is serious. I'm losing my testimony, and he's laughing, and I just got to have an angel. I mean, that's all there is to it. Tonight, I have just got to have an angel come. Joseph Smith had an angel, and he was younger than me, so by hang, I am going to have an angel. So that night, I climbed up on my top bunk. I always chose the top bunk because it was a little farther from the fleas, and it was a little closer to heaven. So I knelt down in my top bunk in the dark room, and I said, God, are you there? And suddenly the room was filled with light, and I opened my believing eyes, and then the car passed. And I was alone again in the dark. And I remember you know, lying there on my bunk and thinking, gosh, how come God didn't answer? I really needed him to reassure me, and he didn't answer. He sent headlights, a car, through the window. And I just was kind of feeling a little angry. Gosh, I really needed to know. I needed that reassurance, and nothing happened. And so I felt a little ripped off. Here I'd been telling people that if they prayed and read and studied and pondered, and then they could know the truth for themselves. And I had prayed and didn't get a response. I think part of the problem was that I was expecting something dramatic. And I think another part of the problem was that I don't know whether I really had read and studied as I should have. I read the Book of Mormon a little bit in seminary, never all the way through, none of the scriptures. I'd read little snippets here and there for whatever we were doing in class, but I never really read it. I read the Book of Mormon all the way through in the MTC, but mostly just to be able to say that I did it and not really trying to get anything out of it. And so as I was there alone in the dark, I think I started realizing that maybe it wasn't God that was letting me down, but it was me letting God down, that I really hadn't done as much as I should have. Now, I'm being very honest when I tell you that up to that point in my mission, my hardest struggle was trying to stay awake during study time. And from that point on, my biggest struggle became trying to find more study time. I started reading the Book of Mormon. I read the Doctrine and Covenants. I started in the Bible. I read A Marvelous Work and a Wonder. I read What It Means to Know Christ by George Pace, which was a very impactful article for me. I read, I just started to read and study and learn. And I remember going to a conference, a zone conference, and going to an interview with my president. And at this point, I didn't know him very well. I was clear out in Vajanar. He was clear down on the other side of the mission. So I didn't see him very often, and I'd had a few interviews with him, but I didn't really know him. And so we did our little interview. How are you, Elder? Fine, President. How's your companion? Fine, President. How's your area? Fine, President. And a couple more questions later, we were done, and I stood up to leave, and he said, Elder Wilcox, do you have any questions? And, my immediate response was, oh, no, because I think I had learned to be a performer. I had learned to perform in plays, perform on stage. And so I think even spiritually, I kind of was a performer. I knew what I should say. I knew what I should look like and do, but it wasn't always from my heart. I had a testimony before I went on a mission, but it sure wasn't deepened to the point that it needed to be. Well, he said, do you have any questions? And I thought, oh no, I can't let him know that I have questions because, gosh, that would kind of ruin my image. And then I'm never going to get called to be a zone leader. And so I said, no, I'd never even had a cavity, let alone a doubt. And so I just said, no, President, no questions. And he said, if you ever have any questions, I'm here. And those words kind of stuck in the back of my mind. Well, shortly after that, I received a transfer to go to another town, a town that I'll forever kind of call my personal waters of Mormon, and I will always consider it beautiful because it's where I came to a knowledge of my Redeemer, a deeper knowledge of my Redeemer. And so in that town, I met a wonderful companion named John Campbell, who has remained a lifelong friend. And oh my goodness, we worked so hard and we served so diligently and we built that little branch up and we loved those members with all of our hearts and we loved our investigators. And I mean, I was giving the mission my all. At that point, man, I wasn't worrying about being homesick. I was just diving in with my whole heart. And I was studying with my whole heart. But still, I felt like the answers were eluding me. I remember Elder Campbell showing me an article by President Kimball called Absolute Truth. And that also had an impact on me as I was kind of going through this journey of strengthening my testimony. But I remember going to another zone conference and President Day pulling me aside in an interview and asking me the questions, how's your area, how's your companion, how's your investigators, how's everything going? And I answered all the questions. And then I stood to leave and he said, Elder Wilcox, do you have any questions? And suddenly I just didn't care whether his name badge said president. Suddenly I didn't care whether he would think less of me. Suddenly, I just needed a friend. I needed him. I needed his reassurance. And so I said, yeah, President, I have some questions. I said, is there a God? And I'll never forget his response because he didn't look shocked. He didn't quote the brethren. He didn't quote scripture. He didn't say anything except yes. One word, yes. And I said, President, does he know me? I mean, with all of his children, does he know me? And President Day said, Brad Wilcox, he knows you by your first name. And I said, President, does he love me? And with all the stupid things I've done in my life, and with all the mistakes I've made, does he love me? And President Day said yes. And that was it. That's when the Spirit just flooded over me, confirming the truthfulness of my mission president's words. Boy, that night I prayed, and my supplication soared. I was speaking to a Heavenly Father that was there and that knew me and that loved me. And I was saying that prayer in the name of a Redeemer, a Savior that I was at last beginning to comprehend. And I thought, God, why didn't God answer me months earlier? Why didn't he answer me that first time I got on my bunk and said, God, are you there? But then I realized that if he had, I would never have studied as hard as I studied. I would never have worked as hard as I worked. I mean, I was like a little gold miner digging for gold. And if I had gotten the gold the very first minute I threw my pick in the wall, then I wouldn't have appreciated it the way I did now when that gold finally came. And I realized that if God had continued holding my head above water, I would have never learned to swim on my own. And so that is why Chile is sacred ground for me. And that's why President Day will forever be a mentor that that impacted me so much. Later, I had the chance to serve as a mission president, and I had the chance to, like President Day, testify to those missionaries that, yes, God is there. Yes, He knows you. And yes, He loves you. I'll just share one more mission experience. My goodness, I have so many memories of my mission. It was such a time of growth and progress. I'm grateful for all my companions and the influence that they were in my life. Grateful for the members that I met and their love and their acceptance and the people we had the chance to teach. I'm just so thankful for the way the mission changed me. And I think that's why I speak so passionately about missions and their importance. That's why I love teaching mission prep. It's why I love teaching Book of Mormon. It's why I love going to youth conferences and encouraging young men and women to serve. Because I know that, sure, my mission gave me a chance to do some good in the world, but it sure did a lot of good for me as well. One of the experiences I had was later in my mission. I served in a town called Villa Alemana. It means German village. And I was in that little town for 11 months, almost one full year of my mission. I served there and just everybody else got transferred and I didn't get transferred. I would just keep getting another companion and another companion. And I stayed there for quite a while. I remember my mission president coming to me at one point and saying, "You're not going to be disappointed if I don't call you as my assistant." And I mean, I was honored that he would even consider me for that, but I sincerely said to him, "No, President, I'm loving where I am. We've got some great investigators. We've got some new members that need some support. I love the place where I'm serving." I said, "We've got a lot going on. I've got a play to produce, so don't worry, I am good." And I meant it. Ransom Love, another mission companion who's become a lifelong friend, came to me one day and he said, "Hey, I heard something about you. I heard you were in My Turn on Earth before your mission." I said, "Yeah, I was." He said, "Let's do it. Let's do My Turn on Earth here in our zone." And there was some method to his madness. We were trying to get the place ready to become a stake. And later Elder Ballard came as a 70 and he did create that stake. So we were trying to get everything ready for that district to become a stake, or maybe it was just for the stake to be split. That was it, and to create a new stake from the two stakes. But we were diving in and working our little tails off and trying to strengthen the members. And there'd been a lot of really great baptisms, but we didn't want to lose them. Throughout the zone, there'd just been some wonderful people who'd come into the church, and we wanted them to feel included. We wanted them to feel a part. And so Ransom had this incredible idea. He said, "All right, let's translate the play, let's get it put together, and let's produce that, and let's just involve all these new converts and investigators in the play. Give them a moment to shine and feel like a vital part of the church." So we jumped into it, and on top of everything else that was going on in our sectors and in our leadership responsibilities, there we were trying to put on a play. And we translated the music and translated the book. We figured out we couldn't actually do the play, but we could maybe translate the storybook and then sing the songs as the time came for them to show up in the story. Well, anyway, we pulled that together and did a great production in Villa Alemana and then another production there in Quijota. And it sure kept me working hard right to the end of my mission, that's for sure. But it really was a great experience too. Members invited their non-member friends. The priesthood leaders felt very proud of the church and proud of the members. It was a great way to get the members united and excited for the stake, for the new stake. And I think it meant a lot to me that years, even after I left my mission, they continued to do that play. They traveled around and produced that and did it all over in the different stakes. And it was just kind of a fun little legacy to leave. When I went back to Chile as a mission president, and I got to go back into my mission boundaries and do some firesides and visit some of the units where I had served as a young man, man, a lot of people were coming up and they said, "We remember you. You're the missionary that did My Turn on Earth, Mi Turno en la Tierra." And it was kind of a fun little legacy to leave there in the mission. And a wonderful chance to strengthen the church and to strengthen those young converts. When I went back to Chile, I had both extremes. I saw some people that we had worked with who were no longer in the church, but I saw others who had stayed strong and raised their families in the church. And so I felt a range of emotions, but I've never regretted doing that little production and having that crazy experience at the end of my mission. And kind of came full circle when my daughter Whitney was on her mission in Spain, serving in a little branch over on the border of Portugal and Spain called Badajoz. And she wrote me in a letter and said, an email and said, "Dad, how did you do My Turn on Earth in Spanish? How did you pull that off?" And so I told her what to do, and bless that little girl's heart, she did it in her mission as well. And so it kind of came full circle. In January of 2003, I came home and Debi met me at the door, which was a little surprising because it was cold outside, but she said, "I want to talk to you on the front porch." So I said, "What's up?" And she told me about how her grandmother had passed away. Debi had been involved with helping to care for her grandmother at the end. And so she told me about her grandmother's passing, and we talked through the experience and the coming funeral and things. And then I said, "Okay, well, let's get inside because I'm feeling cold." And she says, "No, there's one more thing I need to tell you." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Elder Eyring's office called today. The secretary called and wants to meet with us." And my first thought was, oh no, somebody's written some letter because they didn't like something I said in a talk, or somebody's mad because I said something to their kid and hurt somebody's feelings. I mean, because Elder Eyring was the commissioner of church education, I thought that maybe I'd done something at an EFY or at a fireside or something that had come to his attention that wasn't positive. So my initial reaction was, oh no, why does he want to talk to me? He's probably going to get mad at me. And then it was Debi who said, well, no, because he wanted to talk to both of us. And that's when I was able to calm down a little bit and think that maybe instead of being in trouble, that maybe they had a calling for us. And so we met with Elder Eyring, which was a very special experience. He spent well over an hour with us. And he kept saying, this is a preliminary interview. This is not a call. We just need to find out your circumstances and find out your situation. And so he was very, very kind, but then he would always say, now when you get called, remember to do this with your missionaries. And then he'd say, now this isn't a call, but when you're with your missionaries, be sure to tell them about this. And then later he'd say, now this isn't an official call, but when you work with your missionaries, you testify of this. And so I kind of felt like it was part preliminary interview and part training from Elder Eyring on how to be an effective mission president. But we're very grateful for that special time that we had with him, a time in which he treated us with so much respect, but also so much compassion. And he bore testimony to us with tears in his eyes. And I just felt like he was investing his whole heart in helping us realize the importance of this. I had always in my mind thought mission presidents had to be wealthy because I figured they had to stand the expenses of their own mission. And I certainly was far from wealthy. And I found out that the only thing he really cared about was if we were out of debt. And when I was able to tell him that we were out of debt, except for the house and except for one car, then he said, well, can you rent the house and cover the mortgage? And I said, yes. And he said, can you sell the car? And I said, yes. And Debbie said, no. She said, I finally have a car that works, because all we'd ever had were used cars that were always breaking down. And she said, I finally have a car that works. And I just kind of gave her a look that said, Elder Eyring just asked us to sell our car. We're selling the car. So we had a great experience with him, and he assured us that if we were to be called, we'd receive a call from the office of the First Presidency. And it was shortly after that we did get a call from Elder Faust's secretary and said that he wanted to meet with us. So we had a remarkable chance to spend a little time with President Faust, who was so gentle. He was much more matter-of-fact, much more businesslike than Elder Eyring, who had taken so much time and visited with us on such a friendly level. President Faust's schedule obviously was much more crammed and busier, and he was much more to the point. But he had just given in General Conference his talk about the engine that could. And so when he said finally to me, do you think you can be a mission president in a Spanish-speaking mission? I said, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And that was Debbie's turn to look at me and give me a look like, what are you saying to a member of the First Presidency? But Elder Faust laughed, and that's my claim to fame, is that I had a chance to chuckle with Elder Faust as he got the biggest kick out of me alluding back to his talk when I was accepting that call to serve. But it was a humbling experience. It was a invigorating experience. It was a little terrifying because we had no idea where we were going to be serving. And I had always thought that if I was young, I was in my early 40s when this happened. And so I thought, gosh, they're probably going to send me to some far-flung edge of the world because I'm younger. But now I realize that the young men who are called often go to the capital cities where there's going to be schools for their children, because we would be taking 3 of our 4 children with us on the mission. My son would be at school and then going on his own mission. And so I didn't know that at the time, but then later we received our call to Chile, Santiago East. And we were so excited to open that call and so excited to share that news with our children. I remember gathering the little ones, 6th grade, 7th grade, and having a little family night and saying, do you believe that President Hinckley is a prophet? And they said, yes. And I said, so would we do anything that President Hinckley asked us to do? And they said, yes. And I said, well, President Hinckley's asked us to go to Chile for 3 years. And they said, no! And they started crying. And I looked at my wife and I said, what did I do wrong? Where did my reasoning break down here? But she says, oh, they just need a little time to adjust. And they adjusted, and we had a wonderful experience as a family serving together in Chile. And I'll always be grateful for those memories of being with those special representatives of Jesus Christ. And I'll always be grateful for the chance to serve with Debi and with our children in a mission that will forever be a part of who we are as a family. And we loved it. Serving as a mission president was a wonderful opportunity. It was a unique opportunity. And it was a change for me because I had worked with young people through the youth programs at BYU, but I'd always worked with them short term. And suddenly I was working with young people long term. It wasn't just for a week. It wasn't just for an event. it was through a year and a half, through 2 years. And so I was able to see growth that went beyond the surface. It was deep growth. And I was able to see young people mature in every aspect of their lives, spiritually, of course, but also socially and intellectually. I saw missionaries who couldn't read or could barely read when they got to their missions, who ended their missions loving books and loving reading and loving the scriptures. I saw missionaries who were so shy and so backward that they struggled to even make eye contact with someone. And yet they left with a great deal of confidence. So I saw kids grow intellectually. I saw them grow socially and emotionally. I saw missionaries who were leaving home for the very first time and who were so nervous and frightened find their voice and find their place in the kingdom. And so that was a wonderful experience for me, to be able to see growth over time and to be able to see not just a one-time turning point, but to be able to nurture and foster that growth over a long period. The bonds that are created in a mission, the bonds between a mission president and his missionaries, between his wife and the missionaries, are bonds that last a lifetime and beyond. I feel that with my own mission president, and I feel that with the missionaries that I had the privilege to serve with. I'm connected to them. They belong to me. There is a connection that is so real. It's not that we get together and go bowling every Thursday, but when we do connect, we feel a closeness because our relationship is built on the things of eternity. Our relationship is built on the truths of the gospel. And our relationship is built on the fact that we are disciples of Jesus Christ and that we are unified in that love of the Savior. And that gives you a relationship that goes way beyond anything you form in high school, way beyond anything you form in college, way beyond being friends with the neighbors. It gives you a depth of relationship that is very unique and very special in this world. That relationship, that circle of friendship, strengthens you. I love it that my missionaries are still in touch with each other. I love it that they're there for each other, pulling for each other, helping each other. And I love that I'm still engaged in their lives and that they're still engaged in my life. And that we don't just get together and say, oh gosh, do you remember when we ate empanadas on the Independence Day for Chile? I mean, we don't get together and relive those memories. We get together and feel a bond that's as real today as it was in the mission because we're engaged in the same cause, building the kingdom of God on earth. And as long as we're bonded together in that, then we are bonded for life and even into the eternities. Serving as a mission president was a real learning experience for me because you think you know what a mission president does because you see some mission president speaking at a state conference, or you remember your own mission president and having an interview with him. But you don't really know exactly everything that's involved until you're thrown into it. And then you suddenly realize that the calling you have is not just a church calling that takes some of your time. It is a life calling that just eats up every moment of your life. Early mornings, late nights, dealing with problems, of course, as they come up, but also feeling the joys of seeing people come into the church, attending baptismal meetings. I mean, not only do you have your missionaries who are your primary responsibility, but suddenly you're worried about their families and you're worried about the people they're teaching. And so this circle just keeps growing and growing and growing. of people you have to pray about, because suddenly you're praying for everybody who's in the lives of your missionaries, and it just becomes this huge circle of love. Actually, the day-to-day of being a mission president is kind of like that movie Groundhog's Day. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but the guy wakes up and just relives the same day over and over and over. And for me as a mission president, it was kind of like that same thing, because everything in the mission would revolve around a transfer. And so in a transfer, you'd have missionaries leave, missionaries come, then you would have your zone conferences, and you'd have your interviews, and you'd have your, then you'd have your farewell, you'd have your meetings with the missionaries who are completing a year, and then you'd have your meetings with the missionaries that are finishing up. And I mean, then all of a sudden the next transfer would come, and you'd just start all over again. And so it was kind of like you were reliving the same transfer over and over and over again. But it never got old, because you were reliving it with new people. You would be able to see the growth of the missionaries going home, and then the very next day you'd go pick up new missionaries, and you'd see how far they had to come, and you'd know what was ahead of them, and so your life was full of the same routine, and a very busy routine, but it was also full of new people, and people experiencing a lot of firsts. The first time they're doing something, the first time they're teaching, the first time they're giving a talk in Spanish, the first time they are, challenging someone to baptism or extending a baptismal invitation, the first time that they are realizing that they can survive away from home, the first time that they are having a fight with a companion and trying to work through that. And a mission is just a lot of first times. The first time someone says a prayer, the first time someone feels the Spirit, the first time someone is striving to break a bad habit, the first time that somebody feels successful in doing that, the first time that somebody feels like perhaps he can be forgiven, the first time that somebody feels the joy of having a prayer answered, the first time that somebody decides that there's more to life than just getting up and going to bed and living for the party on the weekend, the first time someone realizes that there's a place for him or her in the church. I mean, all of those firsts just come together and create a tapestry that is so rich and full of color and full of depth. And so the routine is pretty much the same, but the people that fill that routine and the experiences that revolve around that routine never get old. They just become a joy. And then when you get home from the mission, then all of a sudden you're going to marriages and getting baby announcements and graduation announcements, and you continue to experience all those firsts with all those wonderful missionaries who become part of your family. When I think about highlights of my mission, I think about special times when the missionaries got to meet some of the brethren. I think about when Preach My Gospel came out in the middle of my mission and the difference that that made in our mission. And I think about when we got to help with the temple open house before the rededication of the temple in Santiago. So yes, there were some highlights that were very obvious and very public and things that I'll remember forever. But I think the real highlights of my mission were just private highlights, just private moments, probably moments behind closed doors, in interviews, or in a small baptismal service, or just having the chance to be with a family that's grieving because of the loss of a child, and or be there at the opening of a mission call of a kid that you've seen come into the church or get active in the church and then receive a mission call, and I just think those were the real highlights of my mission. Were not the big public milestones or the moments that everyone knew about and experienced together. I think the real highlights were just those private moments where you were just one-on-one with someone, and sometimes talking about things that the person had never shared with anyone else, and being honest and open about fears that the person had never ever been able to open up to anyone with. And see, some of those experiences are so personal, I can't even tell you the details of them without breaking confidences. But when I stop and think about my mission and I go back, I remember the big moments, when we'd have a big mission conference or reach a mission goal, or have a big moment at Christmas when all the missionaries were together. And I remember those, of course. But I think the memories that are close to my heart, kind of like Mary, when she says she kept those sacred moments and pondered them in her heart surrounding Christ's birth. I think that for me, the highlights are some of those sacred, special moments when I have been able to be a small part of someone coming a little bit closer to God and feeling God's help, God's grace, and God's love. Those are the moments that I will always treasure, and those are the moments that I look back on that will never mean much to others, but they will mean the world to me. We know there's a Holy of Holies in the Salt Lake Temple, but it's a sacred room that I'll never have the chance to be in. But I think I have been allowed entrance into the Holy of Holies of people's hearts. And those special moments, those private moments, those sacred moments are the moments that I'll remember. Those are the moments that will forever be special to me, because those are the experiences that make the mission much more than just, the pictures that were taken at Zone Conference, or the vaccinations, or the moving people from one apartment to another, or the fights with landlords. And there's all of that stuff that happens on the surface. But it's those holy of holy moments, those chances to go into someone's heart where he or she has never let anyone go before. Those are the moments where I knew I was on sacred ground. And it's not even that I remember all the details, but I do remember the feeling of knowing that there was a level of trust, a level of confidence, a sacred trust. And that's when you recognize that you're truly fulfilling your role as a priesthood leader. It's not when you're speaking in a stake conference or when you're speaking at a zone conference. I mean, that's all important and it's all very meaningful. But it's those private moments when you know that God is using you as a way of reaching one of his children, one of your brothers, one of your sisters, and he's working through you. And that feeling of being an instrument in God's hands is just the core of mission work. It's the core of being a mission president. It's what matters most. It is first things first. Every missionary loves his or her mission. I think every missionary has fond memories of the people and the place. And so some people, you say Thailand, and for them that just is a home for them, a second home. And for some people you say Denver, Colorado, and it just is this second home for them. For me, that second home is Chile. I love the scripture in the Book of Mormon where it says that the people felt like the waters of Mormon were so beautiful, that the forests around the waters of Mormon were so beautiful because it was in these forests that they were taught the gospel. And it's at the waters of Mormon that they made baptismal covenants. And it says in the Book of Mormon that that's a place where they came to the knowledge of their Redeemer. And that's what Chile is for me. Chile will forever be sacred ground. It will always be a sacred grove for me because it's the place where my testimony deepened. It's not that I didn't have a testimony when I went on my mission. Of course I did. I grew up in a wonderful home with a wonderful family and wonderful church leaders who had instilled in me a love for the gospel. But it was in Chile that that gospel knowledge deepened, that my gospel experience deepened. It was in Chile that I realized that I could do more than just jump the church hoops, but I could actually feel it inside. And it could have an impact on me and not just be something I did, but it could become part of who I am. And that deepening happened in Chile. It's in Chile that I learned to take the sacrament and have it mean something more than just a habitual routine. It was in Chile that those covenants came alive. It was in Chile that I learned self-discipline. And I learned that it was as important to me what I did in private as what I did in public. It was in Chile that I started realizing that my happiness wasn't just dependent on how I looked to other people, but what I was doing in private moments. And my satisfaction didn't rest on whether other people thought I was doing the right thing, but it rested on whether I felt like I was doing the right thing. So all of that came together in Chile for me. The kind of realizing that my Christianity, my discipleship, had to be something that was 7 days a week, not just something on Sunday and not just something when I was in public, but it had to be something that just was part of my life. And I will always be grateful for that. I'll be grateful for the people that loved me. I'll be grateful for the people I loved. I'll always be grateful for the eye-opening, life-broadening experience it was to learn another language, to feel part of another culture. But most of all, Chile will always be a place that's sacred to me because of what happened there when I was a young missionary And then what happened when I went back as a mission president, whenever I touch base on that ground, I just feel like I'm kind of walking in my own holy land. It's not the Holy Land, and it's certainly not a place like the Sacred Grove or Kirtland or Nauvoo, where you feel like you're walking on this ground that is important for the whole world. But when I go to Chile, I'm walking on sacred ground that's important for my world, and ground that has made such a difference for me. Some people came to know and love the Savior in the Holy Land. Some people came to know and love the Savior in Kirtland and in Nauvoo. But my relationship with Christ matured and deepened and became very real for me while I was in Chile. So, yeah, it's a place where I serve my missions, but it's much more than that for me. And I think that's how a lot of missionaries feel about a lot of places. And that's the way it should be. I teach at BYU. I served as a mission president in the Chile Santiago East Mission from 03 to 06. And we had a great experience. Right now I'm teaching some mission prep classes at BYU, and I love seeing the young people coming in. I love hearing them announce where they're going all over the country, all over the world. And it's just exciting to think about the work and how it's moving forward. And exciting that young men and women get to be a part of this and get to feel the enthusiasm that exists when you're sharing the gospel, when you're focused on the things that matter most. When people ask me, what can I do to prepare for my mission? One of my first responses is always turn off the TV, turn off the computer games, turn off the video games. I think we've got a lot of young people who spend so much time playing those games and interacting electronically that they're not developing the social skills that allow them to interact with people, with real people, and carry on real conversations in a mission setting. So it's kind of a surprise. A lot of people are surprised by my response because they think I'm going to say, read, preach my gospel, or read the scriptures, or strengthen your testimony. But what I usually say is turn off the blasted electronics and get yourself focused more on people. Sometimes at BYU, I tell the young people, your best preparation for a mission is dating. And they all are shocked. They're like, wait, I'm going on a mission. I shouldn't be dating. And I say, yes, it's exactly what you should be doing. Because when you're dating, it means you're making a plan, you're planning an activity, you're pulling it off, you're making it happen. I said, you're interacting with people. And I said, if you can't ask a girl to dance, if you can't ask a girl out on a date, how on earth are you going to ask somebody to get baptized? And if you can't plan out a date and figure out what you're going to do for an hour and a half, how are you going to plan out your whole day? And if you don't have the courage to go to a dance and kind of put yourself out there and have somebody come up and ask you to dance, then how are you going to have the courage? If you can't leave your circle of friends at a dance to go dance with somebody who's invited you to dance, girls, if you're just with your circle of friends in the corner, how are you going to have the courage to leave your circle of friends and serve a mission? So, hey, get out there. Start conversations. Say hi to people. And stop living in a virtual world where you can't make the difference that you can make one-on-one. Some teenagers say to me, oh yeah, but video games are good for my hand-eye coordination. And I say, you don't need any hand-eye coordination on your mission. No, the hand-eye coordination you need as a missionary is to shake someone's hand and to look into someone's eyes. So turn off the machines a little bit more. Turn off the computer games. Turn off the electronic world and interact with people. And you will be doing one of the best things you can to prepare for success as a missionary and throughout your life.